A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen, all our viewers from wherever you are watching us from. This is Law Matters, the only show that will always put into perspective all legal concepts in order to address your views and reviews and to answer to all your questions. Now, sometime in 2010, specifically on 4th of August 2010, Kenyans were tasked to a referendum and they were invited to vote for a new copy of a constitution which was to later be referred to as the Constitution 2010. A whopping 67% of the total votes that were cast were in support of that constitution. Now, among the very many and robust changes that the Constitution 2010 brought in repealing the old independent Constitution was a very robust and comprehensive Chapter 4. Chapter 4, which entails comprehensive coverage on the fundamental rights and freedoms of all the citizens of Kenya. Now, among the very key protection of the fundamental human rights is the right to freedom, the right to life, and the right to liberty and security of the person. In our history in Kenya, most currently, there is a wave of enforced disappearances, and thus the question and the topic tonight. What is enforced disappearances and what are the safeguards? Do we have the laws locally? Do we have the laws regionally and internationally that protect all persons against enforced disappearance? I am your host, Elvin Onsongo, and in our studios tonight, we have two very able experts in the Constitution and human rights who are ready to take us through the language of enforced disappearance. And before we get into this topic, I will allow my first guest to my left to introduce herself. Karibu.
Hi everyone, my name is Maureen Washira. I'm an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, and it's a pleasure to have a discussion on this matter.
Karibu, Council Maureen, and then to the left of Maureen is another guest, and I will allow him to also introduce himself. Karibu, Akili.
Thank you so much, Ansongo, for having me on this show. My name is Collins Odhiambo, advocate, the convener of Justice Africa, Kenya. I teach law, specifically human rights law and constitutional law at the Catholic University of Africa. Previously, I worked actually at the Amnesty International Africa Human Rights Education Project and the Law Society of Kenya in charge of the public interest litigation. 12 years at the Law Society, 2 years at Amnesty. So this is a field that I'm a bit familiar with its going ins and going outs. Thank you so much.
Karibu, Wakili Collins and Wakil Maureen. We are very blessed to have you tonight, and we are very eager to learn from your language of what is enforced disappearance and the legal protection of all people against this vice. Now, Council Maureen, as you take us through the definition of what is enforced disappearance, help us understand what is enforced disappearance in the context of our legislation or our legal framework in Kenya.
So enforced disappearance is whereby there is arrest, detention, and deprivation of one's arrest. So this is called upon by an individual from the state or an individual who wants to settle mostly political scores. So where they intend to arrest someone and they ensure they will not see the day of light, the course of justice, police station, and they decide to deal with the person in person without using the law itself. So enforced disappearance, that is it. You do not see the light of law, the rule of law, and your human rights are deprived.
Thank you, Council Maureen. Council Collins, we've heard Council Maureen say or mention arrest. So what is the exact difference between a proper lawful arrest and an enforced disappearance? Where does the gap come in between those two?
Legal arrest will actually entail following the protocols and the law the way it is supposed to be followed, being told of your right, the reason why you are being arrested, being given the opportunity to communicate to a person who is your next of kin, and also being given opportunity to be represented by a lawyer of your choice. That is basically talking about the legal arrest. Enforced disappearance always arises. The one common thread when voices want to be silenced. Policemen are actually trying to use the easier way out thinking that they're actually trying to meet the end of justice when they're actually silencing people's voices and committing atrocities, because most of the people who have enforcefully been disappeared, unfortunately, some have gone lost for as long as 7 years, enough to be pronounced to be dead. So it's a way of silencing and killing populations. And I think it is one of the heinous crimes that we've been witnessing in this country in the recent past. It is a shame on the nation.
Thank you, Council Collins. You've talked about it is a way, it's a tool, it's a method of trying to silence a population. Now, still with you, why? What are the other reasons, according to you, why you think we have enforced disappearances in our country away from trying to silence a population? Are there any other factors that enhance or promote or call for unwanted enforced disappearances?
The first thing that would come in mind is the fact that there's a very big gap in law. There is no specific law that addresses issues of enforced disappearance. Therefore, it means that there are no safeguards and for accountability, because when you commit a crime and there's no law that prescribes it, it becomes very hard to be charged. The Latin people have got this maxim that is called noila poena sine leges. Whenever there's no punishment without law. So I think that is one big gap that we have. The second one is that reluctance to enforce alternatives that could be able to help, especially holding the police accountable by their seniors, especially if it comes to issues about low-ranking officers executing their duties. They don't report back and say exactly what happened, or just failing, sleeping on the job. The third one that I can see is just a bad culture of disrespect for human rights and human dignity.
Thank you, Council. Before I move to my second guest, just to remind our viewers that you can continue interacting with us. On Twitter, we are at KUTV_Kenya. On Instagram, we are at KUTV Kenya. And on YouTube, we are at KUTV Live. Council Maureen, Mr. Collins has told us that some of the reasons why we have enforced disappearances is, among many other reasons, is to silence populations who are siding with perhaps dissents and other grounds. Now, and he has also said we do not have a sector-specific legislation that deals with issues enforced disappearance in Kenya. Do we have scenarios in our laws where there is a manifestation of the protection of the protection against enforced disappearance in Kenya? And most importantly, can we find this in our Constitution 2010?
Yes. Chapter 4 is very clear, and it has provided for the same, most especially Article 51, where it says when one is detained, they're supposed to be presented and you follow the full law and a fair trial as Article 51. So the cornerstone is the Constitution. Then when we move from the Constitution, we have the Penal Code that outlines the crimes that one is supposed to perform. However, unfortunately, there are laws which are there. The implementation is the problem, because you see, number one, Kenya has never ratified the International Convention of Enforced Disappearance, and that has been the biggest lacuna we have. So it means even the laws that are coming up that are supposed to protect Kenyans from enforced disappearance do not have a tooth. Yeah, so that leaves a gap. Apart from even the convention, we find that the National Corners Service Act, which should have been the main tool to protect from enforced disappearance, where there is an independent body. We appreciate the work that IPOA is currently doing. However, due to conflict of interest that we have recently seen, we find the body is not fulfilling its mandate, because as we saw, the Willie Kimani case, it took so many years before conclusion of the matter. And it is very unfortunate that parties are now disappearing day in, day out, because we do not have the implementation of the laws we have. And so it will be prudent because so far Kenya has ratified 49 conventions with regards to human rights, and most especially the Convention Against Torture. And it has a law against torture. So it will also be prudent for us to reinforce the same by ratifying the Convention on Enforced Disappearance and come with a comprehensive law and outline in protecting people so that we should not have so many cases that are happening. And Kenya being a hub of business in Africa, it is very important. And with the current situation that is foreseeing, and you see our relationships are globally, it will be prudent that our leaders, and most especially the parliamentarians, to come with a law that will safeguard each Kenyan.
Thank you, Madam Maureen, for that very informative mention of the Constitution and other few statutes that manifestly bring about the protection against enforced disappearances. Before I come to you, Council Collins, my directors are indicating that we need to take a short break. So we're going to take a short break and okay, I'm informed that we do not take a break now. So we proceed now. Council Collins, in addition to what Madam Maureen has told us about the Constitution and the Penal Code and a few other legislations, what have you to add on that in terms of manifestation of the protection against this vice of enforced disappearance?
If you are a serious nation that wanted to see this come to an end, the first thing we have to look at the Article 26 of the Constitution of Kenya that says the general principles of international law and convention should actually be applied in Kenya as a law. That would mean that the government should be bold enough to ensure that Convention of 206 of enforced disappearance can actually still be used as a means through which we can hold people accountable, especially the officers who are responsible for the disappearances. I'm saying officers because the common thread is that most of the enforced disappearances that have been reported are people who have actually fallen in the hands of police officers, either investigating a matter or trying to arrest them to silence something. Secondly, we have the Witness Protection Act. We also have the Victim Protection Act, because some people end up being victims of circumstances which are beyond their control. You witness probably people being disappeared. I'll use an example of Mr. X, who approached us at the Law Society of Kenya then, and he gave a very sad story that he was following a vehicle and the vehicle was having a terrible stench. After 2 days, he realized that there were bodies that were found in River Yala. So Nexus, he was actually riding a motorbike behind this, and these guys stopped and asked him, do you come from around here? So they had his telephone and everything. So later, he received an anonymous call threatening him when this thing came out in the open. Fortunately for him, he came to the Law Society at the right time when he told us about it, and you were able to connect him with an agency that was able to protect him. As we are talking, he's out of the country, but that is not his desire. He would have wanted to stay here and exercise his right and enjoy the warmth of the country and the love of his family, which is not really enjoying. So we need to be bold enough as a country to see what is available to us in terms of law. How can we enforce it so that we can stall this bad culture of exterminating people? Because the most unfortunate thing about these enforced disappearances, bodies end up being found dead. Yeah, so it means the intention about the people who engage in enforced disappearance is basically to commit more crimes, and it is the crime of taking away people's life, which is unconstitutional.
Thank you, Council Collins. And we've had you broadly talk about the convention. This is the convention for protection against enforced disappearances. Tell us, Council Collins, is Kenya, are we a signatory, are we a member state to this convention? And if we are not a member state, why are we not signing into this very critical convention that will deal with this vice of enforced disappearance?
As Justice Africa, alongside other institutions, we've really been making inroads towards advocacy in terms of encouraging our government to ensure that they accede and also sign to become a signatory member so that we can stop this vice that is actually being witnessed in the Republic of Kenya. The current government has constituted, has not shown that they have appetite towards it, but we will still be knocking at their doors and reminding them every day that it is important that this vice has to be stopped. If we don't stop it, then nobody will stop it. Unfortunately, you see, if we continue like this, we'll be losing the entire population of the country. So the risk is that we'll have a country that people will fear living in. And as my sister rightly said, Kenya being what it is in terms of leading business, everybody will run away and nobody will want to bring in their money. So it is important to any person who is in a position that they can influence the enactment of this policy. Putting our signature to this convention, they should make efforts towards it. Secondly, I may need also to clarify that the 2017 coroner's bill would have been a good tool in terms of helping in independent investigation because it gives the opportunity to an independent coroner to investigate inexplicable deaths, either in police stations like the unfortunate one for Ojuang and the rest, so that you don't find violation of the rule of natural justice where one becomes an investigator, a juror, a prosecutor, and a judge in his own cause. It is important that we hold the principles that are so often quoted and also held to be sanctinocrat in terms of holding of human rights. These are principles of the rule of law, ensuring that we follow it to the letter, spirit of constitutionalism, protection of fundamental rights and freedom, plus others.
Thank you, Council Collins. It is indeed very absurd that in the very wake of millions and millions of enforced disappearances cases in Kenya, our country still has what you've rightfully referred to as this international convention.
The international
we lack the appetite.
Yes,
that is
the
what
appetite.
you said. Yes,
yeah.
we do. We are lacking the appetite to become a signatory and to domestically ratify this into our legislations. Council Maureen, going by what Council Collins has told us, that Kenya, we are lacking proper appetite to the most critical international convention that will deal with this vice of enforced disappearance. Now, going by what we have said, we have locally within our legislative legal framework, what is the problem in implementing the list that we have as safeguards against enforced disappearances?
The issue of implementation is the conflict of interest. As he has said, you want to be the judge, you want to be the victim, you want to be the juror, you want to be the prosecutor. Unfortunately, the same cannot take place because we ensure that bodies have their own role. For example, the office of the DPP has its own role, the EPOA has its own role, DCI has its own role, the judiciary has its own role. Unfortunately, the reason there's a lot of interference is because one party who is trying to distort and destroy all forms of evidence wants to interfere with all bodies. In that case, it makes it difficult because, for example, IPOA is supposed to investigate. However, unfortunately, like we saw, they were in the same press conference with the DCI, It was very awkward. It was very unfortunate as Kenyans witnessing such a case scenario because as a Kenyan, if I am a victim of enforced disappearance and I want answers, I will go to IPOA. However, if I see they're sitting with the same body that interfered with the right of another person who I'm aware of and I need their rights enforced, it will be very difficult. And that's why of late you find the cases on inquest and habeas corpus have really been interfered with. And at the end of the day, justice that needs to be deserved to the victims and the families does not see light. So that is the problem we have with enforcement. If there will be a clear independence line from the judiciary, the legislature, the executive, and all state organs that fall between all those three arms of government, it will be easier for implementation. However, due to interference that is taking place, it is very unfortunate to see. And as we see, of late, social media has been giving a lot of information more than what we are getting from our own bodies, and that has been questionable. So as we have seen, the state is the one with information. It's supposed to give us information as it is, as a citizens, so that we know what is the way forward and how to circumvent the situation. Yeah, and the most important, personal liability to the individuals who are executing and doing the criminal acts. If that will not take place, it means we'll have the same problem and the conflict of interest will continue.
Thank you, Madam Maureen, for your very sharp look into the ailings or the problems that face our implementation of the slightest safeguards that we have within our country. Now, I will come back to you, Council Collins, and still want to stretch a bit what we call our lack of appetite to that very important international convention. Now, I will want to hear your thoughts after our short break as to whether if the country Kenya ratifies and domesticates, signs, ratifies and domesticates this international convention, are we going to have a different color? How can this help the nation moving ahead to deal with the issues or the vice of enforced disappearances? But that is right after we come back from our break. Thank you, our viewers, for continuing being with us. Continue interacting with us on Twitter at KUTV_Kenya, on Instagram at KUTV Kenya, and on YouTube, KUTV Live. See you shortly, right after this short break.
Nguzo na uso wa jamii. Kupanda shuka, ukawa tuzo, ukakamavu wake, ukatii na kumfanya mwenye bidii. Kwa machozi na makeke, akabaini jinsi ya kuini. Wewe ni mwanamke ngangari, kwa jinsi alivyo ng'ari-ng'ari. Mimi ni mwanamke. Usikose kutazama kipindi cha mwanamke mwake nami Caroline Kibwele.
Hi, my name is Stella Tioi.
Jina langu naitwa Okemwa Mkwa James.
This is Mandela Gaya.
Ugonjwa ulipokuja ulichukua siku 3 ukaniweka in coma. 20 wamezikwa, 2 ndio wako hai.
I don't even know how it feels to see.
I feel like I cannot express myself well the way somebody who can walk can actually express themselves.
Ilichukua muda mwingi mrefu tena mpana ili kuikubali kwamba mimi siwezi tembea tena.
I've come to actually accept myself.
Ukijaribu kumsimamisha mtu umwambie tafadhali nionyeshe njia,
They find it quite strange talking to you.
You should just make schools integrated
Inclusive setups.
by providing the right facilities.
Welcome back, our viewers. This is Law Matters, a show that will always put into context all legal concepts in order to address your views and reviews and to answer to your questions. With us tonight, we are blessed to have constitutional and human rights experts. To my immediate left is Council Maureen, and to her left is Council Collins Odhiambo. and they've been giving the proper language to what enforced disappearance is in Kenya, what we have in terms of safeguards, what we do not have, and perhaps they'll also tell us going forward, what do we need to do as a nation? Now, Council Collins, we talked about our lack of appetite to this international convention that protects all persons against enforced disappearances. In the likely or unlikely event that our country, Kenya, signs into this document, what hopes do we have? Do we have any hopes of changing or reducing or wiping completely this vice of enforced disappearance in Kenya?
Yeah, we have hope even at the moment. The only thing that puts us in the condition where we are is that we are not willing to breathe life into the constitution that we have. We do not want to uphold the fundamental principles of constitutionalism. We do not want to uphold the fundamental principles that are enshrined under Chapter 4, that is protection of rights. We do not want to uphold the sovereignty of the people, because if you respect the sovereign, then you'll not make them disappear. We do not want to uphold the rule of law, which is a very important or vital principle of constitutionalism. And lastly, we basically are very lethargic towards seeing that systems work. So if we can actually do introspection, then we go to a position where we do what is called the prodigal son experience, meet ourselves, and then we decide where do we want to go from now. We have the instruments, we have the constitutional framework, we have the safeguards. How do we move from here? The first thing that we have to see is that the Constitution now gives us a locus. You can actually challenge in court any disappearances by making an application for a writ of habeas corpus. That would actually mean that someone must to be held responsible for any form of disappearance. If there are deaths, they have to explain. You can go to, that is Article 47 about administrative actions, and seek review to reprimand somebody to do what they were supposed to do. If they do not, you can have a recourse of actually having certain declarations made against them. But that may be too little, too late. We need to develop a culture of respect for human rights. That is where we should begin as a country.
Thank you, Council Collins. Now, coming to you, Madam Maureen, we've had Council tell us that there are remedies. There's a recourse after enforced disappearance, but his closing gesture was that this is too little, too late. Now, shifting our gears from enforced disappearance and coming to perhaps the right opposite of a lawful arrest. As an arrested person within the jurisdiction, what are the rights that an arrested person enjoys upon arrest?
So, number one, you have the right to be informed of what crime you're being arrested. That is number one. Number two, you have a right to an advocate. So they should allow you to contact either your advocate or your lawyer or a family member for the same. And if you have been arrested in the course of the day, you should be presented to court and read your charges. And if you have been arrested on a Friday, because the law says within 24 hours. So it means if you're arrested on a Friday, you should be presented on Monday before a judge or a magistrate, depending on the crime you have committed. So, and there should be legal use of force, not too much force during the arrest. Yes, and you should have the right to be released on bail or bond so that you can present yourself the following day, depending on the crime committed.
Thank you, Council Maureen. Council Collins, we've heard what Council has told us in terms of the rights of an accused person, the rights of an arrested person, and that is in the context of a lawful arrest. And basically, Council has taken us through Article 49 of the Constitution. Now, perhaps you may want to add on to what Council has told us, and also as you do that, assuming the country develops an appetite for these rights of an accused person, where do they start and do they have an end? Where do they end? Take on.
Yeah, the best way to start it is by doing capacity building for the law enforcers. They have to be trained on the new and trending laws, especially the principles that help to safeguard human dignity and human rights related to not treating people in a cruel and a degrading way, rights of ensuring that they follow the protocols that are required to be followed under the SOPs, that is the standard operation procedures for police officers, so that we avoid situations where we have gaps in terms of enforcement. Besides capacity building, we need to build a continuous education process for retraining all the police officers. Sometimes you may find a disparate person who doesn't really know what to do. In the desperation, they also suffer intimidation by their bosses. We need to keep repeating to the police officers that when you're committing a crime, you are on your own. Your boss will not appear with you in a court of law. So always ensure that whatever you're doing has to be lawful. And to the citizen, let's remain very vigilant. If you are vigilant, then we'll actually be forestalling most of these bad things from happening. The problem is you see crime happening and you keep quiet about it. Try to make noise. I like what most people are doing right now. Take photos and ensure that people get to understand that something bad is happening. There's always that power in knowledge. When people know, then they can be able to stop.
Thank you, Councillor Collins. I now want to take a keen look at Article 49 of the Constitution on the rights of an accused person. And Councillor Maureen told us that an arrested person should be produced in court at least within 24 hours of arrest. Councillor Collins, we have seen trends of arresting citizens on Fridays, and it's become a new trend within the country. Now, if you're arrested on Friday and perhaps you're not granted your right to a police bail, that means you spend in the cold cells at least 2 nights before you're produced in court. Is this a clawback? Is this a challenge, Councillor Collins, to Article 49 and any other articles of the Constitution, including Article 50 on fair trial, according to your expertise thought? Give it a voice.
Indeed, it is a clawback to the gains that we've made concerning human rights, and we need to offer restraint. When you arrest somebody on issues which are largely considered to be a misdemeanor, free them on free bond. It's much easier doing that, because with that, you'll be saving the government a lot of money. Secondly, you'll be ensuring that you can be able to lend your services to other people, utumishi kwa watu wote, if you're a police officer, because you're not going to spend much of your time guarding people against probably escaping from lawful custody. So it is a clawback also because we are progressively moving with our constitution, and we do not expect to be seen as going back to where we came from. It was before that these laws were of arresting. I mean, the gaps in arresting people and presenting them during or keeping them in jail over weekend and presenting them on Monday was applied. It's actually a way of trying to frustrate people. Why frustrate a fellow citizen? It's always good that when you arrest, ensure that the OCS is able to give somebody a bail so that they can be able to attend court whenever it is possible. Let us develop positive attitude towards enforcement of the law. The law should not be used as a tool of oppression, but it should be used as a tool for administering justice.
Thank you, Councillor Collins, for telling us that the law should not be deployed as a tool for oppression, but rather as a tool for protection of Chapter 4 of the Constitution. Councillor Maureen, Councillor Collins has told us that we should not be seen as if we are walking backwards from where we've come from in terms of implementing these rights of arrested persons, especially when somebody is arrested on a Friday. Now, you can explain to our viewers, what are the chances of an arrested person getting a police bail? Is it a constitutional right? Is it an absolute right? And should it be granted automatically? What are the chances? And what is the process of perhaps obtaining a police bail once an individual is arrested and taken to a police cell?
The Constitution is very clear. Bail is a right, and only on extreme circumstances under which you're denied So if you are a flight risk, that is the only time you can be denied. Secondly, they also, because previously people used to say grievous crimes were denied, but it is on a case-to-case basis, and therefore the police should not deny a person bail on basis of circumstance or appearance, because some of the people who are arrested are just victim of circumstance. Once the case is completed, you find they were either at the wrong place at the wrong time, or they were either supposed to be converted to government witnesses, because we have realized majority of the people of late, when they're arrested, they later become government witnesses and they give light. So therefore, for a police bail, the arresting officer or the OCS should grant depending on the case-to-case basis.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Council Morin. Still remaining with you, we've looked at the very comprehensive, very robust provision of on the human rights and fundamental freedoms, and especially the rights of an arrested person. Now, trying to marry these fundamental rights and freedoms as provided for in our Constitution, is there a meeting point? Do we have a nexus between these very robust protection of fundamental human rights and enforced disappearance? Is there any connection between those two?
The connection is there because, as you will see, as a country, we have like around 5 to 6 ongoing acts with regards to the same. And the Constitution is very clear. And therefore, the Constitution has given the right to picket, to demonstrate, to express freedom of expression. So the nexus is provided by the right and the freedom under Chapter 4. So therefore, if you try to curtail human rights in the name of enforced disappearance, we are not living up to the Constitution, the sovereignty of the people. And that was one of the reasons as to why the 2010 Constitution is more aligned to Kenyans than the colonial constitution we previously had, because it was foreign to us, but we are back home, and most of the laws are currently aligned with the 2010 Constitution. So the nexus is from the laws and the Constitution. Yes, so that we can avoid incidents that we have seen from Willie Kimani to the Indians who have disappeared, and the recent disappearance which have happened without accountability, and unfortunately the numbers are increasing. And that's why I previously stated that we should now have a personal liability despite the office you're holding. If you gave the orders, kindly you be held in person, so that it can be a cornerstone in this country. And as I have seen, most people look at Kenya, it being a hub of investment and all that, because most foreigners have really invested with Kenya. But when we see there's no nexus between human rights and enforced disappearance, it makes the economy questionable.
Thank you, Madam Maureen. Council Collins, Madam Maureen has ended by saying most jurisdictions or most countries, especially within our region, Africa, look up to Kenya. Now, I want us to put our topic, enforced disappearance, into context. In Kenya, according to the statistics of various institutions or human rights commissions, what is the trend? Where are we at?
The trend is sickening. We've been actually spiraling towards the abyss. I mean, we are going to the lowest of the lowest. But I may need to make a remark here, first of all, that the strategy of holding people over the weekend is a rent-seeking strategy, because someone will want to see who is the greatest bidder to pay how much money. It's a way of illegal enrichment by policemen. And I think it's shameful. They need to stop it. Secondly, I also need to remark that in countries like Haiti, it is actually gangs like the one that is being led by Barbecue that enforce disappearance on people. Interestingly, the converse is that the Kenyan police have gone to protect the people of Haiti and they're not protecting us. So the belief is that we really have officers who can actually mean to put their feet down. Now, coming to what you've said, how can we be able to forestall this? We basically have to remain faithful to the Constitution. Remaining faithful to the Constitution means respecting the rule of law, and secondly, ensuring that we live by the spirit and the letter of the Constitution. The sanctity of life should actually be upheld at all times, and that would mean that human dignity is upheld in Kenya. Kenya is a country that is followed by every other country around because our development is unparalleled. These are things that you expect from countries that are emerging from war, where you have vans that come and disappear. If you read newspapers, you'll know what I'm talking about. So Kenya should not even be decided to be having places like blue houses that we read about. Kenya should be a country that is an example to all. Let us actually endeavor to put our footprints on the sand path of success so that we uphold our dignity and ensure that we remain playing in the league of the Committee of States. We are a civilized nation and we are more progressive, so we do not have to go on the way of clawbacks.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. You've given us an example of our police officers who were sent to restore sanctity and perhaps the rule of law from Barbecue's actions, and our country left us bare. They left us naked as our locals are disappeared, right, left, and center. And Council Maureen told us that we are a country that other countries look up to. Going by the trends you've given us and going by the examples that you've given us of us exerting efforts to help other jurisdictions restore their rule of law and deal with enforced disappearance, are we a country to be emulated?
We are a country to be emulated. I mean, people need to follow our example. For example, you see everybody tend to have trust in us, including USA, in dealing with the matter in Haiti that has defeated them. So let us remain true to the words of our national anthem. Yeah, justice should remain our defender.
Let us remain true to our national anthem. Madam Maureen, why enforced disappearances in Kenya? What are some of these very glaring factors that call for unwanted enforced disappearances? Why do we have this day in, day out?
The reason we have
And is it necessary?
enforced disappearance is not necessary. One of the reasons we have enforced disappearance is political differences. And the political differences have unfortunately made us be at the position we are today. Freedom of expression should be respected. However, the freedom of expression has an extent. So we need to balance our rights and our freedoms to what extent they get there, because we have realized there are people who are now interfering with the most critical institutions, and that has led to enforced disappearance, and also political interest is what is bringing the whole problem. However, the state and its people should come to a common ground to balance the same. Accountability is a very important thing, because the principle says integrity, accountability. The same should remain with our leaders and Kenyans, because at the end of the day, Kenyans are the ones who have elected and put those leaders in those political positions, and therefore they should be accountable to them. So therefore, the nexus between the enforced disappearance is mostly on political grounds and not personal grounds. On very minimal occasions, you'll find it is on personal grounds, and we have realized majority of them, people get the truth and the light at the end of the day. However, when it comes to political grounds, the differences between the state and the opposition, we find we do not get what is really happening. And however, the state should be held accountable. If it's going against its citizen, it should be held accountable in all manner. So that's why every day we call upon the judiciary, we call upon the legislature, we call upon the executive when they're not fulfilling their mandates as listed by the Constitution.
Thank you, Madam Maureen. Now back to you, Mr. Collins, and I'm reminded that we have about 3 minutes before we wrap up our show by my very able director who happens to share a name with you. Now, as we conclude in our final 3 minutes, Mr. Collins, what way forward? Now, what are the recommendations? We've looked at where we are, where we've come from, and the problems that we have, and the legislations that we have, and those that we perhaps need to sign into. Going forward as an expert, which way does our country need to go?
The first thing that I would recommend is that we become a signatory to the Convention of Enforced Disappearance. The second, you need to change our culture from greed, because mostly you find somebody selling themselves for 3,000 to kill. That is really stooping too low. Third is you need to stop corruption, because most of these things happen because we do not want to fight corruption. If corruption is fought in all fronts, then we'll have a country which is good for all of us. We can never have enough for our greed, but we can have enough for our need as a country. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Collins, and perhaps Madam Maureen, your closing remarks.
For me, what I would call upon is the enforcement and implementations of the International Convention and also the National Coercion Act that will enable clear the gray areas we currently have in human rights and enforced disappearance in Kenya.
Thank you. Mr. Collins, let's give a scorecard and try to rate our administration, or rather our government, out of 10. Where are we at in terms of dealing with the vice of enforced disappearance?
We are doing badly. We are at, I think, below 10. But I'll appeal to the Minister of Interior, Murkomen. We are good friends. The last time we met was during the show at the Pentecostal church, where this famous singer came. We had a small conversation. Eventually, we also had a conversation when we met at 3Ds. Please live the spirit of what you believe in. You're a Christian and you're a practicing one. Ensure that the coroner's bill is activated, and also ensure that you hasten the process of Kenya being a signatory to the convention. We'll be laughing most of the time and not mourning the way we are doing at this time. We don't deserve the tears that we are shedding at the moment.
Asante Bwana Collins. Just a figure from you, Madam, our guest. Where are we at? Mr. Collins tells us we are below 10. Just a figure. Where are we?
I would say below 8. Yeah.
Below 8.
Below 8.
Thank you. And thank you, our viewers, for having been with us through this journey of our discussion on enforced disappearances. We're very lucky tonight to have our constitutional and human rights experts to take us through this topic of enforced disappearances. And as you've rightly heard, our scorecard of our current administration, we are scoring so badly, and we are about to not get better, but we need to do better by ratifying what is critical and what is important in order to deal with the vice of enforced disappearances. Do not forget to keep interacting with us on Twitter. We are at KUTV_Kenya, on Instagram at KUTV Kenya, and on YouTube at KUTV Live. Thank you very much, and until we meet again next week, same place, same time, continue watching your favorite TV, KUTV Kenya, and continue watching Law Matters, the show that will always keep putting into context all legal concepts in order to address your views, reviews, and answer your questions. Thank you very much. Keep safe and have a very good night.